This video is brought to you by people who like, share, and subscribe to this channel. You can also support my work by buying me a coffee. The Fellowship of Guelphissauga continues, with the housing cost crisis worsening over the new year. The tent encampments downtown grew over the holidays, with the Corporation of the Shire's 8.52% residential tax increase coming into effect. Sir Edward of Bench had to call in his entire team to deal with the 30% increase in the number of homeless people they feed each week. Meanwhile, the mayor complained about the extra tents ruining the view from his office downtown. He was concerned about failing his Dubious Business Associates with the lack of tourism and business from the growing tent encampments. Whereas the mayor's other friends, the Property Developer Orcs, proposed more changes to the Pergola Commons in the heart of Guelphissauga. Can Carly of Klassen and the Elder Elves do anything about the housing cost crisis? And will the mayor find any solutions later next month? The mayor returned from his holiday slumber as he drove his car downtown on Monday morning. He was excited to resume his game of European-inspired SimCity on the Game Boy he bought at a garage sale. But leaving his save file alone for the holidays had dire consequences, like forgetting to feed your Tamagotchi pet. The mayor's SimCity had deteriorated over the holidays from the Corporation of the Shire's 8.52% residential tax increase exactly on Christmas Day. He wasn't aware of that until he got in his office and powered up his Game Boy, but some things along the way did give him some hints. The mayor drove downtown and passed the obvious hints of his deteriorating SimCity at each intersection. At the corner of the first red light he stopped at stood the tax sign guy. The mayor laughed at his sign about all his future tax increases compounding at 38%, since he still thinks they simply add up to 34%. He honked at the tax sign guy as he drove away. At the next intersection, the mayor ran into one of his police friends. While waiting for the red light, the officer rolled down his window and thanked the mayor for his overtime pay and told him what he was heading to. The officer was dealing with the housing cost crisis, as people now have to live with super sketchy people roommates to afford rents. One roommate was so sketchy that they punched their new roommate on the day they moved in, and that's where the officer was heading to. The police officer waved the mayor through the intersection as he approached downtown. There, at the last intersection he had to pass through, was the tent encampments. The mayor wasn't expecting to see them, since he thought they would disappear with winter season in full effect, and construction season finally freaking finished on the Speedvale Bridge. But in fact, the tent encampments downtown grew over the holidays, due to the Shire's 8.52% residential tax increase. There's now 30% more homeless people to feed each week, according to the team at Sir Edward's Bench downtown. The Banana Guy and Muffin Man were doing their best to keep up, so people don't have to eat the bugs to survive the winter time. The mayor turned left to avoid that area of town and parked his car in the ghetto parkade near City Hall. When he arrived at his office downtown and powered up his Game Boy, that's when the housing cost crisis hit him. Like a deteriorating game of SimCity 1.0, the mayor's screen was filled with pixelated complaint videos from each department chief. He couldn't click anywhere in his screen with all the interruptions, and was getting pissed off. He got even angrier since he wasn't collecting any tourism tax revenue to play with, and decided to complain in high-definition pixels instead. The mayor called his mainstream reporter friend at CTV to help him blow off steam. An hour later, Heather Senarim from CTV showed up to help the mayor. She set up her HD camera in front of City Hall and within earshot of the tent encampments as the mayor yelled into the camera. He complained about how there used to be 1 or 2 tents, but now there's more than a dozen tents ruining the view from his office window downtown. He framed it as a safety concern and suggested they get out of the cold and into shelters. Disrespect, fighting, drugs, this is unacceptable, the mayor screamed. We are failing the tourism. We are failing public realm space. We are failing the businesses. Are we going to have 40 or 80 next year? The mayor shouted sarcastically about the growing number of tents. He couldn't kick them out with a direct bylaw addressing the tent encampments, so motivated by the Rainbow Crosswalk, he proposed making another one declaring downtown a safe space. But the mayor has lots of time to think of a better solution, since his discussion with the Council of Elders isn't planned until later next month. The mayor headed back to his office after his interview with CTV and kept rambling on about the growing tent encampments. He knew the Big Blue Orc was partially to blame with his broken promise that would make him whole over his part of the Shire's tax increase. I have been hammering the province, as respectfully as possible, to remind them at any chance I could get, muttered Guthrie. They need to follow through on that promise. If only the mayor could flex his strong mayor powers to force the Big Blue Orc to pay up before the first round of new property tax bills go out in April. But until then, he's going to play the blame game until next month. My hope is that the minister would table some type of legislation with regard to this issue in February, the mayor grumbled as he ordered delivery from the dining district for lunch. Meanwhile, in the historical lands of the Shire downtown, Larry of Vedder wrote a letter addressing the skeletons in the ground. In Vedder's letter, titled "Time to Focus on Housing People, Not Books," he wrote about a more functional use for the new library building. Has there been any thought given to delaying the new library to temporarily utilize the Baker Street footprint for a social services management facility, including food, shelter, clothing, health, and rehabilitation service functions? He pondered aloud. Funded in part by this year's 8.52% residential tax increase, the shovels have hit the ground for the new library downtown, and the old graveyard in that location had to be moved. The skeletons there belong to people who were buried at the All-Faith Cemetery between 1820s and 1850s. Megan of Brickley, a McMaster anthropology professor specializing in paleopathology, has been loaned the 115 human skeletons for study. It was generally poor people and people who didn't have clear connections who ended up in this burial ground, Brickley said. Quite a few of them came from Europe and had lives that had undergone many changes before they died. Brinkley's research included looking for evidence of anemia, scurvy, and other illnesses. Luckily, the sick and homeless in the Shire in the late 1800s had the Albion Hotel to sleep at, unlike those living in the encampments downtown in the present day. Since acquiring the Albion in 2020, the current owner had to deal with managing its dumpster fire. Surrounded by red tape, crumbling foundation, and bad wiring, the Albion has remained closed for several years. It's been hard, but I'm getting there, the owner said of the project as a whole. It's been a heck of a long road since I acquired the building back in 2020. He plans on moving the round table to the second floor and for a speakeasy in the main floor. But of course, there's no timeline yet for how long the Albion will remain in dumpster fire. Back in the heart of Guelphissauga in the south end of the Shire, the Property Developer Orcs planned another attack. The Orcs at Tricar Development were more forceful with their Tower of Sauron proposal. They grew tired with delays and called in reinforcements from the lords at the Ontario Land Tribunal to grant their wish for two 10-story Tower of Saurons with 325 residential units. Whereas the Orcs at First Capital REIT pushed their desire to build more Tower of Saurons as well. First Capital proposed to redevelop the Pergola Commons area into mixed-use commercial and residential. They want to build 4 mixed-use buildings, each between 10 to 14 stories, featuring 700 residential units and commercial spaces on the ground floor. The units will be perfect for anyone who wants to live in a parking lot. Can Carly of Klassen and the Elder Elves do anything about the housing cost crisis? And will the mayor find any solutions later next month? Stay tuned here to see. This video is brought to you by people who like, share, and subscribe to this channel. You can also support my work by buying me a coffee.